Where former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris will visit key battleground states this week as they race to make their pitch to voters with just 5 weeks until the election. Harris ended her West Coast campaign swing for briefings on Helene's impact. Trump, meanwhile, well, let's say he's traveled to Georgia today where he received a briefing on the hurricane. Meanwhile, vice presidential candidates J.D. Vance and Tim Walz are preparing to face off tomorrow in their first debate. Joining us here to discuss all things surrounding that is Mr. Jonathan Harris, senior political analyst right here on the Live Zone. Good to see you, sir. Welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
So let's jump right into this. Obviously, a lot of focus happens to be on the former president and vice president, Kamala Harris. They are really trumping, if you will, in key battleground states, looking to shore up last-minute voters. In your opinion, what does each candidate need to do just that?
Well, I don't know. It's tough to speak for Trump. I think Donald Trump has a section of the electorate that is pretty much fine with anything he says or does. I don't think that there's anything. I mean, he said himself that he could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot someone and not lose any supporters, which was extremely insulting, but they seem to enjoy it. So I don't think there's anything that he really can do to get any more support. As far as Vice President Kamala Harris, I do look. She's been making great inroads in polling and closing the polling gaps and exceeding the Trump campaign. But I do wish that she would kind of listen to, James Carville preached a word when he said it's the economy, stupid, to about politics. And I think there was an article, I don't know if it was out of Washington Post, I don't recall, but they were talking about how Vice President Harris is closing the gap between her and Trump on the economy. But the very idea that Trump leads at all on the economy when he was responsible for our last recession and then for being the worst jobs president in modern history. And a lot of people will write that off and say it was COVID. But in fact, it was his responsibility to navigate COVID. And the recession that he caused was before COVID was declared. It was in February, March 2020, with the economic slowdown having started in late 2019. And the fact that Vice President Harris and Walz are not, just saying that everywhere they go, I think is an area where they could definitely highlight to increase their polling numbers for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like it would definitely benefit them. Speaking of increasing polling numbers, we know that Democrats outspent Republicans by nearly 2-1 on advertising for the presidential race in the month of September. What does that say that they're spending all this money?
I think they know that it's going to play a huge role. Look, Donald Trump is, in my estimation, as far as I am concerned, one of the, and I don't mean this to be unkind, but I mean one of the least intelligent political candidates I think I've ever seen. And I am including Dan Quayle, who couldn't spell potato, and Sarah Palin. I mean, the idea that this man goes on rants about windmills causing cancer and still doesn't understand how tariffs work after being president for 4 years is incredible. And I think, but what he is very good at is something that he's been doing since the 80s and 90s, which is getting media attention and getting essentially free campaign ads by being on the news all the time. And I think that the Harris campaign understands that they've got to balance that out with these ads.
Yeah, Jonathan, it's no secret every vote counts. In this case, a new poll now says that Harris leads among Latino voters. However, it's a smaller margin than Biden and Clinton had. You think that's going to be an issue?
It's just like you said, actually. It's just like you said, every vote counts. And so I always have a concern. I think we all kind of learned a lesson about polling in the 2016 campaign. Polling is only as good as the people who are responding. But if the polls are accurate, I remember after that debate that everyone said was such a disaster for Biden, he actually got a boost from the Latino voters after that debate. And I think that the Democrats are the big tent party. That's that's what their nickname is. And as the big tent party, they don't just kind of zero in on one section of the electorate. They really try to do a mass appeal to young people, to seniors, to African Americans, to Latinos, they really do try to appeal to even to the wealthiest Americans, to the poorest Americans, working class. So they really are trying to make the appeal that they are the best candidate for all of those different groups of people. And while she does have that, she should definitely try to drill down and get as many of those voters as possible.
Yeah, we're going to move on to the vice presidential candidates in just a second. However, I wanted to wrap up with regard to the presidential candidates talking about Donald Trump's rhetoric. We saw a report recently that he is picking up his rhetoric with regard to attacking the vice president. Is this working for him?
You know, Donald Trump is so fascinating because, I mean, for as many times as he's run for president, I mean, he's never even been able to secure the majority of votes, which means that at no point has he ever convinced the majority of America that he is the right candidate. So, you know, I don't know that it's working for him. I mean, the Electoral College kind of throws the idea of democracy kind of out of the window, and it becomes this sort of a strategic contest of playing to, you know, a handful of states. But I don't think it's working for him. I think, you know, I said this during 2020, and I spend a lot of time as a progressive analyst on a lot of conservative shows, and some of my conservative friends were surprised that I said this, but one of my worries was that during 2020 with the race, you know, the spike in hate crimes and George Floyd and Charlottesville, that he would rise to the occasion and become a statesman and really go, okay, here's my opportunity to prove myself. And he didn't. He told white supremacists to stand by and called COVID a hoax. And so I don't think that it's working for him. I really don't. Now, whether that means he'll win or lose is a totally different thing. But if it were about just securing the majority of votes from America, one person, one vote, he would definitely lose.
Well, tomorrow, all eyes will focus on the vice presidential candidates, if you will, referring to J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. They're preparing for their first and only face-off tomorrow. What do you think will unfold during that debate?
Oh, gosh. You know, J.D. Vance has really shown himself to be a really morally repugnant human being. I mean, just the lies about Haitians alone. These are people who are in this country legally that the town of Springfield asked to come to their community to help revitalize it, and they have. And the idea that J.D. Vance and Donald Trump would sink to that old, tired, you know, if nothing else, go to racism. It's something the Republican Party has been doing since the Southern strategy, which they apologized for doing, I think in 2005 it was. And J.D. Vance shows that if nothing else, they will revert back to that same old playbook. But the idea that they would cause this kind of harm to children having to leave their schools, etc., just unacceptable. And I hope that Tim Walz really highlights that with a tone of the seriousness. I mean, the eating household pets kind of became a bit of a meme, but the real impact of that it goes without saying. And I hope that J.D. Vance really, I mean, I hope that Tim Walz really highlights that, because it's very, very important. It's probably one of the most important things to highlight, that and his silly reducing of women to whether or not they have children, like we're living 100 years ago.
Yeah, something we will continue to follow throughout the afternoon and, of course, tomorrow right here on the Live Zone. Once again, we've been joined by Mr. Jonathan Harris, senior political analyst. Good to see you, sir. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.